Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the NRTC webinar, BEAD Rollout, Next Steps and Insights. I'm Teresa Ferguson, Senior Director, Broadband and Infrastructure Funding with the NRTC, and I'll be your host today. NRTC was founded in 1986 by electric cooperatives, the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association and the National Rural Utilities Cooperative Finance Corporation. NRTC serves more than 800 rural electric cooperatives and 600 rural telephone cooperatives and affiliates in 48 states. I lead the NRTC Funding Services team, assisting our members identify and apply for federal and state broadband and energy funding required to make their projects feasible. BEAD is the next largest source of broadband funding on the horizon. And I suspect you, like me, are wondering when your state or territory will receive approval of their BEAD final proposal. As of this morning, the NTIA's BEAD progress dashboard, updated on 11/21/2025, indicates 20 states and territories have received approval of their final proposal. Trade press reported out that Arizona received official approval just before Thanksgiving. Given the clock is ticking on the NTI's 90-day review window, I'm hoping we'll see another tranche of approvals this week. Today, our panelists will share where their state is in the NTIA BEAD final proposal curing process, explore what preliminary awardees can be doing now, explain the critical steps leading up to executing BEAD grant agreements, and discuss what pre-award spending is recoverable. And finally, what to expect related to NEPA permitting process. If I've learned anything over the past 4 years, it's this: NTIA is going to provide guidance. Sometimes that guidance will change. States will have to scramble, and then each state will respond in their own unique way to the guidance. I can't imagine you'll be surprised today to hear states will implement each of these topics in their own way. And therefore, in the end, it is incumbent on our audience to seek guidance from your state broadband office to navigate the complex BEAD program landscape. It's our hope this panel provides you with context for questions you'll likely need to be prepared to discuss with your state broadband office prior to execution of your BEAD grant agreement. JB, could you advance us to slide 2, please? So I wanted to share with our audience the agenda. Over the next hour, we'll discuss the status of the BEAD final proposals, preliminary award action items, critical steps prior to the execution of BEAD grant agreements, what expenses may be recoverable pre-award execution, and insights on the NEPA permitting process. We organized the webinar because we know you have a lot of questions, and the best way to eliminate confusion is to hear from those that are closest to the process. So today we are sitting down with state broadband policy experts to manage expectations and dispel assumptions and misinformation. But before I introduce our panelists, I have some quick housekeeping items. We will keep attendees on mute today to prevent any crosstalk or echo, but you can submit questions at any time during the webinar via the questions section of the webinar console. You'll see that up in your upper right-hand corner. We will answer your questions during the last 10 to 15 minutes of the webinar today in the Q&A session. Additionally, we will be sending out a recording of the webinar to all webinar registrants later today. Next slide, please. With that, please let me introduce you to our panelists. We've invited 3 state broadband office leaders to provide their insights today. Tamara Holmes, Broadband Director, DHCD, Office of Broadband, Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development. Bree Mackey, Executive Director, Minnesota Office of Broadband Deployment, Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, and BJ Tanksley, Director, Office of Broadband Development, Missouri Department of Economic Development. Welcome, Tamara, Bree, and BJ. Thanks for joining us today to offer your observations, insights, and guidance to our members attempting to navigate the next stages of the BEAD program. Next slide, please. As I said earlier, I just checked the NTIA website this morning and I saw there are 20 states and territories that have received NTIA approval of their final proposal. As I understand it, Louisiana is the only state that has a signed award agreement. Tamara, given Virginia's received NTIA approval of this your final proposal, share with the audience your experience and what the next steps are for Virginia, please.
Sure. And so we received approval. My days are blending together, so I can't tell you how many days. We are currently, from my understanding, our budget is currently under review by NIST. And so we are currently waiting for what NTIA and NIST call curing comments if there are questions regarding our proposed budget. In the meantime, we actually, for those who are awardees in Virginia, we're having a workshop on December 4th, this Thursday in Virginia, for all of our BEAD provisional awardees. And so those are the upcoming things that we've got going on related to NTIA and NIST.
Awesome. Bree, you want to jump in next and tell us kind of how the process is going, where you're at, what the next steps are?
Sure. Yeah, so we are a state that are still in curing. We did meet the September 4th deadline. And one of the reasons that we are still in curing is that we put in a couple waiver requests, and we were just notified that 2 of the 3 were approved, which means we do have some curing that we need to take care of in order to finalize our plan. So we're looking good. We're close. And just need to do a little bit more work there and see what we can find for those locations and move forward. So,
is it super secret what your waiver requests were, or can you share those with the audience?
No, I mean, certainly we put in waiver requests for match. And one was, we all know that there were an 85%, the percentiles. One of them was well exceeding over the 85. We knew it was a little stretch, but it was the only application we received. And so, we felt we had the data, the justification to back why that was a more expensive project, given the history and the expansion Minnesota has done in the state, leaving very expensive locations to serve. So we put that forward. It was denied. And we have 2 others that were also match dollars and were approved on those. So we're happy about that.
Yeah, I'm sure that was a relief. BJ, does this all sound similar to you? Where are you guys in the process, and what does that look like for Missouri?
Yeah, thanks for having me today. We're similar to Minnesota in that we're in the middle of curing. The major difference is we did not hit the early September deadline for submission. We were actually late September before we submitted. We had prioritized doing 2 rounds of applications, and for that it made us go longer than first part of September, and so we're kind of in the back of the pack as far as getting through approvals. At this point, we are almost done with our data side, meaning agreeing to the locations that need to be served, but we're still working through kind of more of that waivers and things. We actually just submitted a waiver regarding match requirements and working through some of those others regarding locations eligible for service and those things. We have gone back and forth on those things. So I think we're getting really close to starting to look at cost and curing some of those questions with NTIA, but we're probably 2 to 3 weeks from approval at this point is my best guess.
That's helpful. And I'm going to throw this out there for anybody to answer, but it might be closer for you, Tamara, with regard to, I don't think most people understand that there's a 2-pronged process, right? That's happening here. You've got to get the NTIA's approval, and then there's an element that NIST is playing in this process. And I think it's changed over time, but I think, those of us just, who are on the outside of this may not know that process. So could you guys help me out and give the audience some guidance on what this 2-prong approach is?
Sure. So there's actually a 2-prong approach, given what Bree and BJ just shared. There's a 2-prong approach within NTIA to even get your final proposal approved. There's the data side, which BJ is in the process of finalizing, and then there's the actual programmatic side, which is what Bree's in the process of finalizing, like how you're going to actually manage the program and what are the requirements for the internet service providers. And so once you make it through the data process, cleaning the data, I call it scrubbing the data, and you agree with NTIA and they agree with you, then you really focus on the more programmatic side, which ISPs might need waivers of the 25% match, And so there's a two-pronged approach before you even get through the approval process. And even when you go in the portal, you're submitting your data separate from your programmatic narrative. And so there is a two-pronged approach even once you clean the data. The good thing, it seems like BJ is going through both at the same time. And so it may allow him to have his review move a little faster than ours did, because we had it was like, get the data clean first and then go over the waiver process and things of that nature. And then once you receive approval from NTIA, you are typically contacted by a I think it's a grants officer at NIST regarding your budget. And so I will share that the only funds that have been released to the Commonwealth of Virginia out of our $1.48 billion allocation has been our administrative dollars, so that we could actually go ahead and staff up. We do not currently have access to our award portfolio, which right now is $545 million. That's the amount of total awards through our BEAD deployment side of the house. And so we currently do not have access to that funding, which is what we're currently waiting for NTIA to, through NIST, to either do curing or approve the budget. I think because of the holidays and folks being off, we've not gotten any questions at this point. I'm knocking on wood. I heard another state got their budget approved. I won't say who that state is because I literally just heard that yesterday. I don't think it's public yet. And so I'm tempted to call that broadband director to go, what was in your budget? To see if we were going to
tell me offline, I'll call them.
Yeah, but can I cheat off your paper for a minute to see if there's anything
Right.
that came up that might have been a red flag?
I just think it's really important, guys, to talk about this stuff, because I think people, are always looking at you guys and saying, where's the money coming? When's the money coming? When's the money coming? And what they don't realize, I think, is all the hoops you're jumping through on the back end with, with the feds. So Bree, BJ, you want to add anything to that? Or, did Tamara do a pretty good job? What do you got?
I was just going to add one thing, and to Tamara's point, like, yes, there's the programmatic and the data side, but if you have to change one, you have to change the other. So, like, it was a constant back and forth, and we, do the one and then realize, oh, you also have to now do the other. So it's definitely a ripple effect on any little thing you change here is going to affect something here. And then ultimately, we also aren't even talking yet really about the budgets. So just the whole BEAD budget and what we're required to do with that, make sure everything matches. So it is a lot to manage.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add is just kind of high level. When you're talking about NIST, that's the team on the federal side that does, like, make sure all the pennies are the same and make sure the math is exactly right. NTIA does some of that, but that's really when NIST and your program and your grant manager work with you on that stuff. So kind of from the audience perspective, that's what NIST does in this process. We had similar operations with our NTI BIP awards, and they're the ones that make sure the budgets are right and that what they have recorded is the same thing that you have recorded, and that A plus B equals C in all cases. So just for everybody's kind of high level understanding, that's the role that they play in this, and why it is important and why you have to have that approval before you get those funds.
Yeah, and I will add really quickly, from a financial standpoint, I don't know if many folks know this, Commerce does not actually manage the grants that they fund. NIST actually is the arm of the grants manager for NTIA. In EDA, it looks a little different, and so it just depends on what part of the portfolio you're of. So NIST actually, even when we draw down money and things of that nature, when there's questions about, funds, it's the NIST person that's the primary point of contact along with our NTIA program officer. And so NIST is the primary for the finance side of the budgets.
Well, you guys are busy doing all that. I think, JB, can we go to the next slide? Bree, I'm gonna, ask you, given you've had, Minnesota's had over a decade plus in administering broadband grants, what guidance would you give to preliminary awardees right now? Like, you guys are dealing with the feds, you're dealing with all that stuff, but right now, what can preliminary awardees be doing? I put a list of things up here because these are the things that are kind of hitting the folks that I'm working with. But, can you give me some guidance? Are there other things that they could be doing right now to be poised to jump once you guys get approval?
Yeah, really good question. And members from Minnesota are on here, what we keep telling folks is this is different than our state program. So don't assume that anything is going to be the same. Don't start unless you have solid guidance from us. But I will say on the list that you laid out, which are really important components, is that potential awardees can be assembling that information, especially if when they put their information in the portal, things may have changed, or if it needs updating and finalizing. Specifically, we'll be having them verify, update, upload any of the key data necessary. And then I think, you're going to hear us all say this is, we are still waiting for some of the guidance. So, and it's going to continue to come. And so just be really engaged, much like, Dr. Holmes said, we're going to have a webinar in a week or two to say, answer questions, give updates that we do know, what we don't know. I think that's a key part too, is communicating things we don't know. And then we're just waiting for NTIA on new contract, updated contracts and conditions of those contracts. So I would just say in Minnesota land, you can be working on your narrative, you can be working on your standardized budget, project schedules to streamline that. Don't start anything. Don't assume that we're going to be able to do this the way we've always been doing it. It is very different. And I think most of the applicants now are really engaged in that, but it doesn't hurt to continue to say that.
So Tamara, you mentioned something, yes, in our panel prep call, because these popped up, the cyber and scrim plans. And I'm gonna, just tee that up for you. Has that changed? Has there been further guidance? Should we let the audience in on the little secret?
So there's ever evolving guidance, even within the existing guidance. And so what I typically say is, what I thought was happening yesterday is different today. And so ISPs are required to have a supply chain risk management plan as well as a cybersecurity risk management plan. However, from my understanding, based on the most recent guidance, is that we do not have to actually collect those plans. Most providers did provide them, at least to us, through the application process. And so you're moving from submitting the plan to the state broadband office, and it's still at the discretion of the respective state broadband office, to now certifying in an assurance document that you have a plan. We are not going to vet those plans, but your plan does have to be consistent with the requirements that were provided in the original guidance. That still stands. So your cybersecurity plan still has to be consistent with the NIST standards. And so we do not necessarily have to collect those and vet those, which was our understanding originally. Now, if we already have it, we have it, you check the box. If we don't have it, you're certifying that you do have one, and we no longer are required to vet that. And so that's one
BJ,
that come out.
I'm not leaving you out of this one, BJ. JB, can you advance to the next slide? Because I think this is a really great example of the, nuance between states, y'all. And I think one of the things that, the process of data collection is going to be a lot different. Tamara and Bree have kind of, explained what they're doing. BJ, can you please walk us through the risk assessment process that Missouri is using and why it's important, why you think it's, a really good step to get you there? The preliminary award is there.
Yeah, I appreciate it. All the teams are different, right? Our team is made up of people who've done broadband and non-broadband grants before. We also have the experience of having done a lot of ARPA-funded broadband, and through that experience also, getting audited by our state auditor and working through those processes. So some of what you see reflected in what we're doing and how we're handling these things is from that depth of experience. Also, we have team members that have been a part of other Department of Economic Development grant programs. And as our team describes it, our risk assessment is it's called a risk assessment, but it's really part of a getting to know you with the subrecipient, between your subgrantee, between your grant manager on our team and the potential awardee, and learning how do you handle things, because every awardee handles things differently. That's what we've learned, through doing ARPA funded projects as well as NTI BIP projects. And learning some of that on the front end will really help us handle things on the back end. Like some people, turn in their receipts and reimbursements directly. Some work with a third party, and that complicates things differently, but then we know what to expect. And working through that process really helps us to understand that. Another thing that you'll see here is a reflection of us wanting to have things on record. Should we be asked, do you have the conflict of interest policy for provider X? Because the word of the policy says provider X must have a conflict of interest policy. And so then if we have it on hand, it's easy for us to respond to those requests when inevitably they do come, whether it's 1 year from now or 2 years from now or 3, when maybe none of us are here anymore. And so, but that's really ultimately, when speaking with our grants management team about this, it's really about trying to make sure we understand each other. We have record if we're asked if something should come up, how is it supposed to have been handled? It's not trying to have any gotchas or trying to make anyone produce things they shouldn't have already had, but just trying to make sure we understand how things are handled, and that kind of thing. Because sometimes you have to have audited financials. If you're a not-for-profit, you don't have to. Then you have to see those things. And when it comes to things like the cybersecurity policy and things like that, it is the kind of thing. Should we be audited, we would have to come back to you and ask for it anyway, because you certified you had it, but we didn't have proof that you had it. And so that's just trying to make sure that we're all on the same page and really simplifying for kind of, I'm not trying to scare anyone because they're not that scary. They're just time consuming. The inevitable fact that eventually someone's going to come look through the records of these things.
Absolutely. For the next piece, I want to go into what some of those pre-award recoverable expenditures could be. JB, can we go to the next slide there? As the preliminary awardees await NTIA's approval of their state's final proposals, many of them, they just want to get the ball rolling, guys. I know you're hearing this from your stakeholders. Under what circumstances will preliminary awardees be able to recover eligible expenses if expended prior to execution of their grant agreement? And I know that's kind of one of these wordy things, but it matters, right? If each of you can kind of explain to the audience what activities and eligible expenses can occur before the execution of the grant agreement, and if there's a date certain, I know a couple of you have date certains that are out there. I really think this is part of that. What can we do now and stay within on the lane, not getting in the gutters and risking funding, but trying to be shovel ready when you guys are ready to go. BJ, you've been last the last 2 times. I'm gonna start with you on this one. So jump on in.
Yeah, number one, don't break ground. Like that's the number one thing everyone on this call needs to hear. If you're guiding people, if you're a sub-grantee, it's universal across the board. Don't break ground. Like that's the one thing you can't do. You can do lots of things. They may or may not be reimbursable, but don't break ground, because these do require NEPA approval, and you're going to have to make sure you have that approval before you do any ground disturbing activity. So that's number one, and that's the main thing I think everybody should understand. In Missouri, we have determined with our legal that we are going back to December 5th of 2024. And so that's a while from now, going backwards. But that was when we thought people could have actually been doing planning activity to prepare for a grant for the original round 1 of BEAD. So in Missouri, December 5th of 2024 is kind of our go back to date. And like we would assume that would include, planning activities, or even, gathering materials, working with contractors if that cost money on the front end. All of those things of planning for grants or even gathering materials could go back to, again, December 5th, 2024. And so we're willing and able and ready to do that. The one thing everybody has to make sure is we can't pay for construction that wasn't approved by NEPA. So that is not going to be an allowable expense. But other things that could have reasonably be a reasonable cost with the preparation or anticipation of a grant, we will be able to use as allowable expenses. So that's the short of Missouri. And we wanted to give a date pretty early, knowing that a lot of people took on cost in preparing for the original round of BEAD. And if we can, for those people who were lucky enough to be recipients, we would like to cover those costs as well.
Bree, I know you guys, I think you're kind of looking at a date certain, or I don't know if that's official yet, but it's been discussed at least, I know.
Yeah, it's the date of the RFP was posted. I don't know exactly the date as of this second because there's a million dates in our heads, but that is the plan, is when the RFP was posted. And then I would just, to add on to the question in general is, certainly we defer to states that see and have the new contract terms and language, which none of us officially do yet, I don't think. But in that, it will, we'll have more accuracy on what is permissible. Don't, to BJ's point, don't do any implementation except for what NTIA has approved under NEPA and environmental historical components. And then there are a few things that are understanding, at least my understanding, that are permissible: pre-construction planning, collecting information that needs to go into the portal and review, obviously, applications for environmental permitting, any of the studies that would go into all of those components, administrative costs, pre-award application costs, and other, preliminary procurement. I could be wrong there. Maybe Tamara has more information because she's further along, but I think, that is part of when we get an approval, we get a document that gives us more information, and it isn't just generally vast shared at this point.
That's why I wanted her to back clean up on this one. So it's over to you, lady, because I know your process is a little different and you are further along. So those two things matter right now. So shine some light on this one.
Sure. And so we've been doing last mile deployment projects in Virginia for 8 years. And so we primarily run a state program. We've had some federal funding through American Rescue Plan, through capital projects. And also I have the pleasure of serving as the state's Appalachian Regional Commission Program Manager. And so we have a lot of experience in federal programs. And so for us, we do something called prior authorization, where a grantee, whether it's directly a unit of local government through my state funding, or ARP or CPF, or what will happen through BEAD, where they will submit a request and we will review the request and give them what's considered a written prior authorization to start incurring costs. We do this as part of our normal course of business. And so for BEAD, trying to figure out what the sweet spot was going to be for us in terms of the date. And so with our workshop that's happening this Thursday, so fresh off the press, guys, we will be sharing that process, especially for providers who have not participated in our Virginia telecommunication program previously in Virginia. And so there will be an explanation on how to seek prior authorization. It will only cover soft costs. It will be as of the date of our workshop. Our normal process, if you are a prior Virginia co-grantee, it's typically the day of our contract negotiation meeting. And so we are offering some flexibility. So it will be as of December 4th, 2025, you will be eligible to incur costs after you request for prior authorization and we respond in writing. And so that's hot off the press. If you're coming to our workshop on Thursday, you've heard that officially here from me this afternoon.
Well, that is a perfect lead in to the next slide. JB, if you could go to the next one. This is just kind of NEPA is scaring everybody, guys. And I got to be honest, when I was at the Colorado Broadband Office, I've got PTSD from NEPA. I mean, we lost a $6 million Reconnect grant because of NEPA. And so I can never do one of these without talking about this. And I know, Tamara, you guys are looking at handling NEPA permitting a little different because you've had this long history with, federal funding, throughout your career. You've been, heavily involved in these types of programs, and there's certain things that federal programs want done first. And I think NEPA is one of them, isn't it? Even before executing grant agreements. So talk to us a little bit about what that looked, and I'm going to add to it. I think you've had some direct conversations with the folks at NTIA about what this process is going to look like, the intake, the portal, all of it. So kind of tee us up here.
Sure. So the one thing I want the internet providers to realize, and I do have over 20 years of doing NEPA personally, managing grant portfolios. there tends to be, and I'm not taking a stab at NTIA with this comment. There's a lot of conflating between permitting and NEPA. NEPA is not a permitting process. And so when I explain it to our internet providers, permitting is the things you do in order to break ground. NEPA is the thing you need to do in order for me to give you a contract. And so those are two different things. And so a lot of times when, and there are a lot of misunderstandings. A lot of our ISPs thought that they would have a profile in the ESAT tool that NTIA has created because NTIA has been presenting that tool. And so we've had providers actually try to log in and get a login. And so that is actually a responsibility of the state broadband office and or their consultant, whoever they're using to submit the documents that have to be completed for NEPA. And so what we're doing in Virginia, because we do have a long history of managing federal grants as an agency, we allow our communities who do federally funded projects to utilize what's considered their planning district commissions. In other states, they're called COGs, they're called local development districts. They may be different names within your state. We're contracting with our Association of Planning Districts, and they're basically going to be on standby to prepare the NEPA document for the internet providers that have been awarded funding through BEAD. And so they will work directly with the ISPs to put the record together, and then they will actually enter the information into the NTIA portal. We will review it. We will click submit. I will say that for us, your BEAD project area may not be your NEPA project area. The reason I say that is because the BEAD project area is, for us, the way NTIA does it, each BEAD project has to be submitted as a NEPA record. And so we're saying to ISPs, we're going to have to drill down and make your project areas smaller for the purposes of NEPA. Part of it is because if there's a federal land in the middle of your project area, we might want to not hold up your whole project, because if anyone's ever done have to gone through a national forest, which I've got a project right now, we got to wait till the salamander goes through the entire season before we're allowed to cross the stream. And so we are trying to streamline the NEPA process in Virginia to streamline as much as possible to expedite it, so that you all can, to BJ's point, be able to break ground in areas across the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so we are contracting with the Association of Planning District Commissions. And so they're available as consultants to ISPs in Virginia. You do not have to use them. I suggest you do use them because we're paying them directly on your behalf. And so it's a cost savings to the internet providers that are going to be participating in our BEAD program.
Gotcha. BJ, I think you and Bree are doing some similar things. I think you're bringing in specific consulting support services, right? Tomorrow, I love what you guys are doing, that you're engaging the community for this. But BJ, can you tell me a little bit about it? And Bree, you're going to do the same thing. So I'll get to you in just a sec on this one.
Yeah, just prior to Thanksgiving, we finished the procurement process, and I think that offer has been sent out. We haven't got the official that we're under contract yet, but we are bringing in a third-party contractor with additional staff to help us help providers through this process. And so to kind of help with guidance, they're going to be, helping with templates and like helping you to answer the questions and what is this question looking for and those kinds of things to help us guide the providers through this. Now, we can't do the work. You have to do the work. We can review it and say, hey, you may want to take a second look at this, or what you might want to consider in the answers, in order to help streamline us getting it to NTIA in the easiest process available. I do think it's going to be a big help to the provider world. If not, we wouldn't be doing it. But we took that on, and hopefully it'll help alleviate some of the fears of getting through NEPA, because we did this without help when we did the BIP program. We saw, projects were slowed down 6 to 8 months because of that. I know that NTIA wants to avoid that as much as possible, and I do think broadband offices, whether you're doing it the way Dr. Holmes is or others, we're going to have to help you answer those questions as quickly as possible to try to get those categorical exclusions or not as quickly as possible. So yeah, that's what we're doing here in Missouri.
So Bree, we've seen some of these questionnaires and released by other states, and I think they're hitting on all the things that Dr. Holmes was talking about, but I think it surprised everybody when they started seeing these pretty lengthy, questionnaires. So Bree, I know you've got a whiz bang expert up there. I remember one webinar, you were just so proud that you guys had hired this, very qualified individual. Can you kind of help us understand what you think that role will play in, in each preliminary awardees process of approaching these NEPA requirements?
Yeah, I'll just take a quick step back. So, doing broadband for 12 years, one of the challenges early when I started with the office years ago now, that was brought up by our ISPs before all of the details in the weeds of BEAD, was the challenges of coordinating and getting all the approval to be able to maximize what we call the growing season in Minnesota, because of weather challenges. And so we have a charter group that brings all of the state agencies together that talk about broadband specifically. And out of that conversations came the need for the office to actually hire their own land use and permitting coordinator. And when I started having NEPA and all of the credentials as a licensed archaeologist was a love to have, but didn't ever think we could get. And we were just really, really fortunate to get somebody that was a state a NEPA expert and for a state with the USDA. And so she has jumped in, she can run circles. She is on the calls giving consultation with NTIA all the time, going through documents. And so Minnesota has a small win here. I'm really proud of that, but also really proud because it impacts the current programs we have. And we're just seeing a great opportunity there to consult with other state agencies so that, they're all short staffed. They have huge workloads, and it's not, for lack of wanting broadband to happen. It's just like all of us strapped for time. So having those conversations and really understanding the scope of their work. So Megan is her name. She will be our lead. She will be walking through everything, and not that we're necessarily, she's doing the sign up and approval, but the gentle handoff and having those conversations, knowing that when it gets to the next step, it's ready to go. Those agencies have the trust in her to be able to review quickly, sign off, and hopefully move on. I do think also with the NTIA tool, the misconception that this is a magic thing. You still have to do the things. This is an assessment tool. And I don't know how many times, we hear like, oh, well, this is all it is. And it has, rightfully so been kind of sold like that. And unfortunately, like I said, it's a tool in the toolbox, but it's still all of the requirements, both state and federal. Let's not forget, a lot of us states have our own requirements, need to be followed when we do this. And we're here to help. And we have lots of questions still too. So thank you for the patience in advance, but knowing that we have this expert in NEPA and a licensed archaeologist is really, I'm not nervous on this component of BEAD personally. So.
Well,
And
God bless you, because I am.
I was going to add in, the other thing too is ISPs have to be willing to give us the information we need to help them be strategic about the NEPA process, right? So we reached out to all of our providers and said, we need your fiber routes. Well, why do we need their fiber routes? Because I've got to try, and I'm not trying to avoid federal lands, guys, but that NEPA process, when you've got to go across the federal land, will take longer than if you've got to go across state land. State land I can try to help with. To Bree's point, she's got a staffer that has those relationships that'll help get through the NEPA review process with the consultation. And so be nice to us. We're not asking you for anything that we don't need for a purpose.
Yeah. Well, and I think, Jibby, can you advance us to the next slide? Because I'm gonna take a couple of pieces and put them together here, because first and foremost, Bree brought up something very, she did it very politically correct, and I just don't have to be that way on this one. So BJ, we're getting told over and over in these webinars that, there's an easy button. This, all these tools NTI is putting out, there's just going to be an easy button on, if you're in existing rights of way, on existing poles, in existing previously disturbed rights of way, you just hit the easy button and it's called a categorical exclusion. I've gotten my hopes up. That's where I'm at. So tell me, is there an easy button, BJ?
Well, I think Bree nailed it, right? Like all of the things that have to be answered still have to be answered. I only say this from the experience of going through the BIP program, and I've said that way more than I should. It was only $40 million, but it was valuable in that it was kind of the precursor to doing BEAD by NTIA. And
Yep.
when we did that, they found out things that weren't great, right? And part of it was this, but you still have to answer all the same questions. The answers just have to be accurate or answered the way they want to see them in order to get a categorical exclusion. And that even took 6 months in the BIP program. I say that saying I do not expect the BEAD program to take that long. I do think because of this tool, I think it is a tool to speed things up on their end, that they can go through the questions very quickly. And if they're answered in the correct fashion, they can get you a categorical exclusion relatively quickly, and then you can move forward with your project. But it is not going to bypass any of the necessary requirements. NTIA, since the former administration, was trying to find ways that they could bypass parts of NEPA. And I think repeatedly we're told, no, we still have to go through these processes. So I do think, and this goes for, previous NTIA and current NTIA, they have tried to find ways to make it quicker, but I don't think there's any way we can keep from having to do those things. And as Bree said, it's not just BJ saying it, make sure that's clear. As Bree said, we're not bypassing things. It's a tool to help them get through it quicker more than it is for the provider to be able to do things a lot easier, which is why we've all hired staff in ways to try to address it.
Right. So I'm going to use your official title here, Dr. Holmes, because this is a loaded one. That link at the bottom here, right? It put a cold chill in my down my spine. They're describing in here, they want a description of 75% designed network. I mean, I think anybody that knows how these massive infrastructure projects are built, you don't walk in the door day one with a 75% design. You don't, because there's new roads that are going to come in the next 3 to 4 years. There's new housing developments that are going to come in. Help us kind of navigate this. How are you as states going to deal with this? I mean, we provided high-level designs in the submissions. Is that going to get us through this, or are they? I mean, I'm seeing things like report exactly where you're staging trucks. That's not reality. That's not how these things are built.
I do this day in and day out. I run the Appalachian Regional Commission program. ARC funds broadband projects. I've funded several broadband projects. There is not, and so what my advice would be is, what is currently your company's process and what is the industry standards to what you have available to you? And so to your point earlier, every provider submitted their high level design as part of their application. That is what is submitted through the NEPA process. If we wait for you all to do 75% low level design and engineering, we will not start this grant program in 2020. What year are we in? 2026.
Yeah.
And so there is no other federal program that I have administered that requires you, because if you go back to your budget, your prior authorization, engineering is one of those recoverable costs. So then why would we want you to do low level design and engineering if we're going to pay you for it, right? Now, Bree and BJ they are including that maybe as a recoverable cost for a longer period of time than we are. But most providers, I mean, we've been doing it for 8 years. No provider I know ever has gone out and done low level design and engineering prior to a grant award. Never. They don't even, I mean, to a certain point, I don't even know how many actually used to talk to utility providers. They just know who's the utility provider. They did not do that for BEAD, by the way. They were required to have those conversations. Right. And so submit what your original build plan is. We will use that for the NEPA file. We already have talked to our SHPA office, which is our Department of Historic Resources. And then if anything changes from your original design, we will have to go back to notify our Historic Resources staffer, and then you'll have to provide more detail, but it does not change your original approval process through NEPA. And so for Virginia, we're asking for your fiber routes. we're going to submit that as your project build plan.
Mhm.
And then if you have to deviate due to not being able to get an easement or get a permit, or it takes a little longer, we will have to do an update, but that won't preclude you from being able to proceed. That is a normal best practice for every single other federal program I've ever worked in and what I'm currently working in now.
Bree, anything to add to that, or?
I would just say, we know that when the uploaded information into the portal, we are, I think a good thing is to provide some extra room in the project areas. Again, we didn't have project areas. You all define, or our grantees define them. They know that, they knew what was best, so they probably have a better understanding of those locations and carving out areas that may need some extra wiggle room there. So I would just say making sure that, early in the process, just have a little bit of room there. And then our portal is going to allow and does allow uploading the GIS geospatial data, and then you'd be able to show the impacts of those locations. So, we're trying to get it out there. We'll continue to try to feed that information, but having just a little extra room, if necessary, is going to be helpful, I think, in the long run.
I appreciate that. BJ, anything to add? And
No, not a ton to add. I just don't expect that we're going to ask people to completely change the way things have been done. I mean, I just don't think that's realistic. So, yeah, we'll try to work with both sides and say when NTIA is being irresponsible or, or asking for too much, and the other way around. We'll try to, it's kind of the role we play in this, is try to sand the edges off of both sides and try to make the program work.
I appreciate that. So the next slide, guys, is we've got some questions in the question box from our audience, and I'm going to try to jump into those. I have one from Jose Lavada. Who approves the updates if you do have a route change? Is it local, i.e. state, or will that be a federal decision?
From my experience running a federal program prior to BEAD, is we do have to consult with our Department of Historic Resources if anything changes, because the ground you're going to disturb may not be the ground you were originally going to disturb and what they've gone through the process. I do not know if we have to go back through NTIA for approval, but I know that the agreement with Historic Resources is based on ground disturbance, and if that changes, we do have to go back for determination. But again, this is ever evolving guidance, and I don't know if anyone's actually asked that question specifically to NTIA at this point, but a best practice is you have to go back through at least Historic Resources within Virginia.
Awesome. Hey, hot off the press, Wisconsin was just approved.
Oh, good.
There you go.
When we've done minor changes, it really wasn't a complicated process to go back to our program officer with NTIA and get those agreed to. It was not a huge thing when we did it. So hopefully that carries over.
Yeah, hopefully. One question we had, or statement, it seems like all the reporting and compliance requirements seem complicated to track. What are y'all doing to keep this data straight?
I can just say we are utilizing the portal that we have to the max on this information, and trying to make it as easy as we can for grantees to be able to upload that, and then we have access to it versus, having to share information other ways, like it's in one place. I think we're going to continue to see policy and rules and things change and evolve as, tough questions come up that we just had, like we don't have the answers yet. But, leaning into all of our experience with state programs, and at least having that as, that's where we start. And then there's the add-ons, at least for our state. We're going to stay with state law, state procurement, state rules, but then we have to add on all of those things that are required by NTIA in order to meet the program needs.
I don't want to step on anybody. Anybody else want to? Okay. I thought this was a really great question too. Just this is a detailed oriented one. To confirm, based on your understanding, professional services such as detailed engineering for conditionally awarded BEAD projects would be a recoverable expense. Do we need to hold off on those activities until NTIA approval and grantee contract agreement, or can we begin now? I know the answer to this, I think, but I want to hear you all answer that.
I'll start, and I'm going to speak with too much certainty because Bree's going to say until we see our new subgrantee agreement, which is absolutely true, right? But as the question said, as we understand today and has been approved in our plan by our FPO, until going back in Missouri, yes, that is a recoverable expense and you can start it now. Now, the caveat to that is everyone has to do so understanding the risk that they are taking, that until NTIA approves these projects, you are at some risk of them saying, no, you can't, we can't pay for that project and your project is out. Now, in Missouri, we think there's a pretty low risk of that. If we haven't been in contact with you about your project or asking for changes or increases in match, you probably aren't seeing much of that. But until we have that full approval, there is some risk that NTI comes back and says project A, we can't approve and we have to go to a different provider for it. So that is the risk you're taking at this point. But if you know you have a low cost project with a high match included in it, you're at a pretty low risk of that.
Appreciate that. Bree, something on that one?
Yeah, I mean,
you already quoted.
I know, and I love that about all of us. We know each other so well. Yeah, understanding the risks. I mean, even within our state program, I think, you know, some of the conversations or arguments I've had with NTIA staff with this is, you know, there is a desire that they believe everybody wants to get started on that. And I just feel strongly like that is a risk, and how many providers are going to go out and spend the money on consultants for a finalized plan until they know and have secured a grant agreement. So yes, that can be worked on. It could be recoverable, but it's a risk. And I think with this program, there's been so much uncertainty that I don't necessarily see a lot of that happening until there's more certainty for folks. And I mean, just being realistic. But, you know, talk to your state and make sure and have a conversation. I guess not make sure, have a conversation about it and see where everybody is tracking. You know, we'll do our best to navigate that. But I don't think any of us want to put providers at risk of spending money and doing a ton of work ahead of time that is, you know, is not secure.
Well, I really appreciate I think everyone on the webinar, BJ and Bree and Dr. Holmes know my son's a climber. So I just noticed the Matterhorn is on this slide and I'm like looking at it going, I feel like that's what we've all gone through. But I got to tell you guys, my cell phone's been blowing up. We got the hot off the press, Wisconsin's approved today. Just heard Michigan just got a text from them. So that's that tranche I was talking about earlier. I'm hoping to see, you know, I'm hoping like 5 to 10 more states are going to get a notification today. And, you know, I feel like we've all been to the Matterhorn, to the top of it and back. And you know, I've aged through this process. So I can't tell you how important it is for everyone listening. Please be kind to your state broadband directors. They've been through 3 years of churn on this, and they are doing the best they can with what they've got in front of them. And so I think it's really important, as I said in the beginning, make sure take away from this, you know, the context for questions and go directly to your state broadband office and get answers. That's really what the purpose of this was. Let's see. We got another one from Ernie Holter, Indiana, New Hampshire, and several others got theirs today as well. So we're doing good. I know we've only got a few minutes left, and I want to give the panelists an opportunity to leave us with, you know, any insights that you want everybody to take away today? And Dr. Holmes, I'm going to give you first crack at this one. What do you want folks to take away? And if there's anything we didn't mention that you want them to think about, please give them that guidance as well.
I will say lean on your state broadband offices. I think that often when folks get grant money, they're least likely to contact us when they have questions because they think about the, as BJ said earlier, gotcha. We've been giving broadband grants out for 8 years, and it's always been an open book test from the application process through the award process and even through the deployment and construction process. We're going to be able to provide technical assistance, and so that's why we have staff. I have staff who worked on the industry side, and so they understand. I know enough to be dangerous, but not enough to actually go out and watch, fiber going in the conduit and knowing that it's working properly. I can't do that, but I hire smart people that do. And so I think we're here for you because our ultimate goal and our jobs are to make sure, for me, that every Virginian that currently does not have access to broadband gets broadband through this program. And so we will do that together.
Bree, closing thoughts?
Yeah, closing thoughts. Yeah, I mean, obviously, check in with your broadband offices and have the conversations, no questions limited, because if you don't ask, we don't know. And we have plenty of questions for you all as well. We're taking a focus here in Minnesota of what we do, of collaboration and partnerships. And I can't, I've said this from the beginning, I don't build anything. I can't really do anything. We're facilitating, financial assistance and technical assistance, but we really rely on the providers to be able to step up where they're able to and, voice their concerns and questions and know that at least, in my state, I'm going to take every question you have and maximize it where I can until I'm told no, unless I know no, but with BEAD, it's often I don't know. So ask the questions. So I don't think I would be here without the support of the partners and collaborators and ISPs in the state of Minnesota because that support has got us through this and know that we're really trying to impact people's lives and every connection really does that. And that's pretty remarkable.
BJ, last but never least. Take us home.
The other panelists really did a good job. Contact your state broadband offices. They're the ones that are doing the program best for you. They'll do the best they can to try to answer those questions. Same with ours. Also, second part of that is be patient with them. Similar to the other states, we're going to host something in early January to try to go through compliance and what we see happening. But the caveat to that is there could be changing policy coming. We've all heard, rumors and know that there's going to be some changes to our agreements. And so until we have all of that written, there is some uncertainty, and we really apologize for that. None of us want that, but we're all working through this together. Know that we're on your team trying to get to that. And so I do think that's the biggest thing you need to know. And then lastly, and Teresa, you heard me kind of kick this off at our meeting that we did in person in October. It's easy for us to get bogged down in the things that aren't perfect about this program. It came in with big numbers and huge promises and all of that. But I think we have to just keep our eye on the idea that this is still a once in a lifetime investment in broadband, that 10 years ago, none of us could have dreamed we would be investing $800 million in broadband. When I was working in the legislature asking for $5 million, no one would have ever dreamed where we are today and the impact that we'll be having in every one of our states. Is it perfect? No. Is it easy? No. But we truly are making a once in a lifetime investment across the entire United States that will change the reality for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. And that's what we really have to keep. Just like Bree, we don't make connections, but we do facilitate that. And I really appreciate all those people who've been patient enough to stay through the program. And now let's actually implement it and do great work. But keep that focus that there is a lot of great work going to be done. Is it as easy as we had hoped it might have been? No. Is it perfect? No. And has it taken a long time to get here? Yes. But there's a lot of great things that we should stay focused on that positive side of it.
That mountain's beautiful in front of us. Yeah, a big thank you to BJ, Bree, and Dr. Holmes. I really appreciate, you know how much I appreciate each of you individually. Everybody who attended today, thanks for joining us. We're trying to keep the conversation going so that people get good information and continue to pursue this program. As BJ said, it's a huge opportunity here. So everybody be on the lookout for the recording of the webinar, which we'll be sending out to all the webinar registrants later today. And again, I hope you all are safe and happy and having wonderful holidays, and hope to see you all again soon. Take care. Bye.